In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 10 hand to feet combination patterns that I like to use. Now, there are so many out there, and there's so many different varieties that I use in different fills and different beats, but these are my top 10 favorite. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to show you how to play them, and then I'm going to show you why I like them or why I use them so much in my playing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with number 1, go all the way through, all the way to 10. I'm going to give you a bit of an example. Here we go. All right, the first hand to feet combo I'm going to be playing is very standard. I'm just trading 8 notes on my snare drum and 8 notes on my bass drum. I play this quite a bit, and you're going to see it in a lot of the fills that I do or any play-alongs that I do. And the trick to this one, I'm not just playing 16 notes on the snare and then 16 notes on the bass. I'm playing 60 notes on the snare, 60 notes on the hi-hat and the crash, or the ride. Now you can do this on a splash cymbal. You can do this on small little chimes. You can do this on other toms, on the snare drum itself. But the main thing you want to know and the main thing you want to practice is following your bass drum with your sticks. So you're not just trading, you're actually following along the whole time 16 notes with your sticks. Let me show you how it sounds. So that's how that one's played. Now, as you can notice, I'm following the bass drum on my closed hi-hats and on the ride cymbal. Again, you can move them anywhere you want. Why I like this one so much is because when you're normally playing a cymbal, whether it's a crash or a splash, they're not really rhythmic. They're more for creating atmospheric sounds like a crash or a china cymbal, or they're more for accents and stuff like that. So when you want to actually play shots or something rhythmic with your cymbals, it's always good to follow it with your double bass. You'll see Mike Portnoy do this a lot. You'll see a lot of drummers do this, and this is a great hand-to-foot combo that allows you to utilize that. So take that, practice it, and try to put it in some beats and fills of your own. Let's go to number 2. All right, number 2 is a pretty basic one. It's 8-note triplets followed by a flam. And there's 6 notes on the bass drum, and the last note, which is the 7th note, is on the snare. You can put this note anywhere. As long as it's flammed and it's accented, you can put it on the toms, you can put it on the crash, and you can put it on the snare and crash. There's so many different ways you can utilize this. Why I like it so much is it's a great way to finish songs or finish fills or finish beats. It's a great way of accenting something and getting something to come to a close. So let me show you how it's played, and then I'll show you how I use it in a musical setting. Check this out. So as you can see, that's just one example of how to transition that into the ending of a fill. And I was playing them in 16-note triplets instead of 8-note triplets. When you're practicing them, as long as you're practicing in a triplet feel, it's actually not that hard to bump it up to 16th notes or the 8-note triplet. Just find what the pulse is and go from there. Now let's move on to number 3. Okay, number 3 might fool you a little bit. It's groups of 7, and it's a mixture between 16th-note triplets and 32nd notes. And the reason why I like playing these so much is when you play them really, really fast, it sounds like you're just buzzing around the kit. When really it's just triplet followed by 4 notes. Triplet followed by 4 notes. And you can move them all around the toms. You can put them on the snare. Again, if you wanted to do on a rhythmic cymbal like the hi-hats, ride, or splash cymbal, it's totally up to you. Here's how this one sounds. So it might sound a little bit choppy just playing it on the snare, but when you're moving it around the toms and it's blending in with the bass drum, it sounds really good. So try to do this one fast rather than slow, and try to implement it in a lot of your different drum fills. It's really cool to do, and it's really cool to blend those triplets with the 32nd notes. On to number 4. Now number 4 is very cool to play in solos and when you have a little spotlight on you. And the reason why, it's a group of 4 on your bass drum followed by 2 8th notes. So it's going to sound like you're speeding up to a shot. Let me show you how it sounds, and then I'll explain a little bit afterwards. Check this out. Okay, now on the sheet music, I have it written as 8 notes right after the group of 16th notes. You can make those quarter notes. You can make those whatever you want. It's the fact that you're building it up with the 4 strokes on the bass drum and then having accents. And this is why I love this one, because when you're playing a solo and you want to just do a quick shot, it's great to build it up with a lead-in on the double bass. Let me show you what I mean. So as you can see, I was just messing around, throwing in some tom hits, throwing in some snare drum, some crashes, but every time I did that, I would bring it up with 4 hits on my bass drum. They could be 32nd notes if you wanted. I played them in 16th notes, and the shots afterwards, they could be 8 notes, they could be quarter notes. The whole idea is to play a group of 4 followed by 2. This one's cool. Try it in your solos. It's a great way to break things up, practice it, and give it a shot. On to number 5. All right, if you have been following along with some of the fills that I've done, you've probably seen this one. And this one is, like I say, one of my favorites, and it's a triplet-based pattern. And the way I like to think about it is as a 6-stroke roll. How I play my 6-stroke rolls, and I'm going to show you this right now on the sticks, is like this. So all I do is I accent the 2 single notes, and then I kind of play the softer notes on the snare drum. That's the way I kind of feel it. It's almost like a gallop, or it's got some sort of a pulse to it. And when I was creating this hand-to-foot combo, which I'm sure has already been played by many other drummers, but when I was playing it and when I was developing it for myself, I was trying to feel that pulse in there. And I would have the 2 kick drums try to blend in with the toms. Here's how I play it. Here's how it's written. Give this one a try. So, as you can see, it's got a really nice flow to it. It's almost like a circular feel, and it's really cool to play in fills. Next time you're playing, try to throw this in your patterns. You don't have to play it in 8th note triplets. You can also play it in 16th note triplets. It's completely up to you, but definitely give it a try. Let's move on to the next one. Number 6 is very similar to number 3, except instead of going from 16th note triplets to 32nd notes, we're going to keep it all 16th note triplets. Basically, we're going to do 4 notes on the snare drum, followed by 2 on the bass. 4 and 2 is 6, so it's very easy to add in to a lot of different fills and a lot of different beats. You will probably see these in quite a few of the examples that I've done in the intermediate and the advanced fill section. So check those out and try to find a place that this fits in your music. Here's how it's played. So as you can see in that example, I did move them around the toms a little bit at the end, and feel free to do that yourself. Also, don't be locked on one drum at all times. Instead of playing 4 on one drum, maybe split your hand up so you play alternating on a snare and a tom, or on 2 different toms. Feel free to try it out. These are all hand-to-feet combinations that you get muscle memory, learning how to play these things certain ways so you can implement them in your own playing all around the kit. Let's move on to number 7. All right, so you should be seeing some sort of theme with the way that I develop my hand-to-feet combination patterns, and number 7 is no exception. Number 7 is similar again. This time we're going to be doing 32nd notes on your sticks, followed with a group of 16th notes on your bass drum. And the reason why this one I use quite a bit is pretty much for fast tempos, like the other one. This one though, because you're doing 32nd notes, you can do it a lot quicker around the toms, and you can add it in a lot more places, I find. So let me show you how it's played, and then I'll speed it up and play it around the toms so you can see what kind of speed you can achieve with this. Check it out. So as you can see, I'm almost buzzing on these toms and the snare drum when you get to those kind of speeds. And the trick to this one, when you're playing at speeds like that, you can't really do more than 4 or 8 strokes in a row. If you're trying to do a long extended time at that speed, it's going to tire out and it's not going to sound too good. So by doing groups of 4, you can go quicker for shorter bursts. So what you have to do in order to transition from one drum to the next, or from one group of 4 to the next group of 4, you add in 2 bass drum notes. And those are the 16th notes that I play. And that's what gives it this sense of uniformity when I'm playing around the drums, when really I'm just doing shot, 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 shot. But by adding in those bass drums, it brings it all together. Here's how it sounds like with a click. Number 8 is a little bit different than the rest in the fact that I'm not using my double pedals. I'm only using one. So this allows me to keep my hi-hats closed. It gives me the opportunity to start bringing in the hi-hat in this pattern, and it's a really cool pattern to do. You've seen this probably in lots of different music. It's a John Bonham classic. It's just your 8th note triplet, kick drum, snare, snare, kick drum, snare, snare. And what I like to do, instead of starting with my right hand on the snare, I like to start with my left. And the reason why is I can really add cool feels when it comes to playing beats. I can add ghost notes onto my snare. I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a sec. But practice left hand lead and right hand lead because they're both beneficial. Here's how it sounds. Okay, now as you can see, I started with my left hand. Here's why. I'm going to play just a basic beat using only this pattern on my snare and hi-hat, and watch what I can come up with. So as you can see, there's tons of uses for it. I added an extra bass drum here and there, but you can hear the kind of beat that I came up with just by using that triplet pattern. I also moved it around the toms a bit. You can use it in fills. I used it a lot to ghost note this snare drum and accent my hi-hats, which is why I start with my left hand sometimes. Try it for yourself and play around with it. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is very common, and you've probably seen this one in a lot of the practice exercises for developing speed. You've probably seen it in fills, and you're going to see it in a lot more settings as well. The reason why I chose it for one of my top 10s is because when I was playing and doing a lot of my fills and soloing and practice, I realized that I use this one quite a bit. And it's not just because it's fun to do, but there's a lot of application for it. All it is, you're trading 4s on the snare drum, or 4 on your stick, and 4 on the bass drum. You can play it in 8th notes, you can play it in 16th notes, you can play it in 32nd notes. I'm going to show it to you in 16th notes here. I'm going to show you how you can really increase the playability of this by throwing in cymbals. And just check this out and you'll see what I mean. So there you have it. I was playing it on the snare drum. I was playing it around the toms. I was even showing you how you can play one hand on the snare drum and one hand on the floor tom to change it up a bit. But definitely practice this one. It's one of those patterns that it's great for an exercise in developing speed, coordination, and then using it in fills. It's really cool. Here's how it sounds with click. Now before we move on, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about with this pattern, and that is when you play your first note on the bass drum, you hit a crash. Why? I find it not only helps me keep track of where I am in the measure or in the pattern, but it also adds some more flavor. So instead of just playing solid bass drum snare, bass drum toms, you're actually giving it more flavor and more creativity, just a better sound when you're playing it. So try adding a crash, open hi-hats, a splash, or something like that on your first bass drum hit. All right, number 10 is all in 16th notes. It's not super hard. Just watch it, read it, count it out. You'll notice that there's more snare drum in this and less bass drum. There's only 4 bass drums in this whole measure. So when you're playing this, try it slow. Make sure you're playing it to a click as well. The reason why I put this one in here is because if you add this to any one of these hand to feet combination patterns that I've just taught, it's a really cool way of breaking them up, putting 2 and 2 together, and making one pattern sound completely different. This is a really cool pattern. Here's how it's played. Now what you're going to notice is at the end of this measure, you're going to play a group of 4 snare hits. When the pattern repeats, you start with 4 snare hits. So there is a period in this pattern where you're going to play 8 snare hits in a row, or 8 stick hits in a row, because you can move it all around the kit. So here's what it sounds like with click. So those are my 10 hand to feet combination patterns that I chose. Now there's literally tons and tons of them out there, but these are my 10. And what I would suggest you do is not just play one after another, try playing them in sequence. Play number 9 and 10 in a row. You'll see what you get. There's a lot of cool things you can do like that. Also, like I said many times, don't just stick with playing them on one drum. Move them around the toms, play them on the cymbals. Another cool trick you can do, instead of always playing with your right hand leading on the drums, do what I do and experiment with your left hand leading. I always start with my right foot on the bass, but you could even try starting with your left foot if you wanted to. The possibilities are endless. When you've gotten these down, you also might want to check out Jared's and Sean's 10 hand to feet combos. They're all really cool. I'll see you around.